you think there is any challenge really doing that? Looking at the looking to the fact that there are a lot of highly educated people of African origin, both in Africa and outside of Africa. I'm asking the question because if we continuously repeat the fact that we should, it appears as if we do not. Somebody might be asking the question: do we really have the capability of doing it, or have we refused to do it? What really is the point? Because looking at the capacity that we have, it should really be available. This story, we should have enough story to contest the alternative story, the alternative story that we have. But up to this point, the question is still as if we are going to wait for a day that we should start telling the story. As if we yet do not have the people to start telling the story. So where are we that we don't want to, or that we don't have people to tell the story?
Well, we have people that are telling the story, and there are many people who can tell the story. However, we must understand that the education system that was there on the African continent was put in place to serve a particular system. Therefore, many of the professors and the other educationists that came during that time were serving a particular narrative or a particular system. And it is why we did not see them coming up with policies or coming up with books, or that is why we never saw them telling this African story as it was, because the education system was tailored to serve a particular system which was prevailing at that particular time. Secondly, the colonizers were very happy, were very clever. When they sat down at the Berlin Conference to partition Africa, they did so deliberately so that they can put us in different communities and countries. And you now, when we talk of Africa now, we now have the French speaking, we have the Portuguese speaking, we have the English speaking, yet we are on the African continent. And this was a deliberate move by the colonizers to make sure that they do not allow us to unite as a people on the African continent. And until such time, I think you have seen what happened recently on this Pan-African Parliament, where we ended up having two groups of people, if not three. One group which was calling itself the English speaking, and the other one which was also the French speaking. Until such time when we embrace ourselves as Africans, the English speaking, the English that we speak, the French that we speak, even the Portuguese that we speak, is not ours. We had our own languages on the African continent, and we had one Africanness that prevailed at that time, which we should embrace and not see each other as from the north, the east, the west, and the south. And when we do so, it will make it easy for us to speak with one voice, and people hear us as Africans. Even when you go to the United Nations, we have seen even Africans failing to agree as Africans on fundamental issues that seek to develop Africa. Just because some are French speaking, some are English speaking, and so on. And this, it was a deliberate ploy by the colonizers to make sure that they keep us disunited, so that they continue to pull the shots as it were. So one thing that we need to do, we have the capacity on the African continent, because even before the coming of the Europeans, before the coming of the colonizers, Africa had an economic system. That is why they could come to Africa for trade. We had a system which was there, which by now could also have developed, because the European system had not developed to what it is today before that. In fact, it is what it is because of what they have done on the African continent. So we need to say to ourselves, which is true, we have the capacity, we have the brains, and we have people throughout the world from whom we can draw their expertise to come up with literature, to capacitate the educators on the African continent to begin to tell the history, which is an African history, to begin to give the consciousness that our African youths should be having. We have that capacity.
Thank you so much. I really love that. We have the capacity, and I know we do. Looking at all the universities we have. Oh, come on, we do have the capacity. The capacity is there. Looking at looking at Nollywood in Nigeria. Hey, come on, we do have the capacity. Yes. Why not?
We have the capacity, sure.
Yeah. We just need to make sure that we really decide to do this. Now, when you were talking, I remember that I mentioned this thing before, and I'm going to ask you the thing again, and it's this. I don't know if you have noticed it, but I have noticed it, and I always pay attention to it. When at the United Nations, heads of state come to make statements, come to talk, do you see that African leaders, they come to talk, and nobody dare to speak African language? Is there anything prohibiting the speaking of Igbo, Hausa, Yoruba, Swahili at the United Nations? Or maybe I'm the one that is not hearing it?
There is nothing that prohibits us from speaking our languages. But here we are talking of leaders, some of whom went to school even when I had left school, who learned through a system that sought to serve the interests of the whites. And that made our African languages inferior. And it is because of this inferiority complex that we feel we cannot express ourselves properly in our own languages, and we resort to a foreign language. And I think, for me, I think I can better express myself in Shona than any other language. So when we go to the United Nations, if you can, because we in courts and even at the United Nations, we should be having interpreters who interpret Shona, who interpret Yoruba, who interpret the Hausa and many other languages. We should be having them so that our African leaders can express themselves in the best way possible as Africans. In fact, they can derive pride in speaking in their own languages. And sadly, even in our parliaments, in most of the African parliaments, we see our leaders, they communicate in the foreign languages. Well, it's time that we as Africans...
Sometimes very poorly when they whether they can speak eloquently in their own languages.
Yes, they wanted to convince, to argue in English, yet they can best argue in Shona, Ndebele, Swahili, Yoruba, and so on. Why can't they do that? These are some of the things that take us a little bit back, because we are not valuing who we are, our culture, our identity, and our language, which is very important. If we can speak English, surely we can take pride in speaking Shona and any other African language wherever you are. If I go to the United Kingdom, well, they said when in Rome, do like what the Romans do. Well, I will try to do so. But if somebody comes up with another language that I do not understand, I will honestly reply in Shona. And then we will both be saying what? And I will also be saying what? because you have spoken in a language that I do not understand, and you expect me to understand that. Where there is need for us to hear one another, to communicate, well, let us do so. But in an African gathering, surely we must be able to speak in our languages. At the United Nations, where others come and speak in their languages, we must also take pride in speaking and expressing ourselves in our African languages.